How much of any CGI was used on their bodies in 300?
Zero CGI in the body.
Really?
Really zero. We didn't have the money, honestly.
So many people talk so much shit.
I swear to God. I'm like, you need Mark Twight on this show, and then Mark will tell you, Mark trained the guys. Mark's like this amazing. He's like, I've known Mark for years, and he's an incredible alpine climber. He's just like this insane. He can shoot. He can do anything that anyone can do. And like when I asked him to train the guys, he's like, this sounds like Hollywood bullshit. Like train actors for a movie. Like they're all fakers. They're all liars. And I was like, look, you will make them honest. And so he's like, all right. So he started training everybody. Yeah, there's Mark right there. And his gym was called Jim Jones, right? Like just as an example of like how hard he is. But yeah, and so like, he had trained all these SEALs, and basically it was basically the same thing that he was doing with the SEALs he did with these acters. And
so a prerequisite had to be,
you can imagine,
you had to be in some form of shape.
You had to be in some shape, teeny bit of shape. A couple guys came to us that were pure actors, but 90% had some shape. But
how much time did you have to work with them?
I'm trying to remember. Normally what I like is at least 5 weeks. I like 5 weeks, and I'll take more if you'll give it to me.
Sure, for a film, but to prepare physically.
Yeah, I'm talking about before the film starts. At 2 months or 3 months, I like before the film starts of training.
That's enough time to get them into that kind of 300 shape?
It never is. These guys trained doubly as hard, and they knew a lot of them were athletes anyway, so they came in with and Jerry had more time. And Jerry trained with his own guy. Jerry didn't train with Mark. But so, it depends. When Henry Cavill, Mark trained Henry for Superman, and that was longer. I think that was 3 months or 4 months. But yeah, it's never enough time because you just can't get it. And
right.
Like actors, they just ideally, you'd have half a year. 6 months would be perfect, really.
At least.
Yeah. I mean, just to get you, visibly, I always say the one thing about movies is that, and the thing about Mark that I love was that he went to psychological war with the actors in the best possible way. What he was looking for, he would always say, I'm going to put you in your pain cave, and you're going to find out a lot about yourself when you're in there, right? And then when you come out of the workout, you're going to grow. I'm going to grow you here. And some people just don't. They don't like that, Especially people who haven't fitness isn't like a lifestyle that they've chosen,
No, that's a journey that you have to be really dedicated to go down. If you're just a kind of a casual and someone comes along and says, I want to put you in the pain cave, you're like, I'm not interested in that.
I think it works with actors because he makes it part of the crucible of the performance, and I think if you can connect it to the performance, it makes the training mean something. I've always been like a sort of bodybuilding fan, like in the 80s. I trained with this guy in the 80s who was just like a teacher that lived, this guy Jim Arden, who lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, where I grew up. He was a teacher at this school called Greenwich Country Day, which was near the boarding school that I went to. And I was like, everyone expected me to be like, I played soccer. I was like an athlete. But then I sort of got into like weight training. I was like, that's what I want to do. Everyone thought I was insane. But and I think it was my meeting Jim and Jim being like, because Jim had this in the basement of Greenwich Country Day, there was like this weirdo gym, and Chris Dickerson and Mike Katz, all these like crazy 80s bodybuilders would show up and train with him, and it was like this weird, I'd be like, this is awesome. And we went to the Olympia, he took us to the Olympia in New York City. I don't know, what year was that, 82 or 3, I forget what year. But anyway, it was just really cool, and I was just in this. And then, of course, I was Schwarzenegger. I read his book, Education of a Bodybuilder. It's a weirdo book.
Did you get involved in bodybuilding yourself?
I mean, I trained with gym because I thought like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll be a bodybuilder one day. That'd be cool. Like, you know, but of course, like I was also painting. And I remember when I was a senior in high school, after I graduated, I went to London for a year to art school to paint. And I lost like 40 pounds of muscle in that year. Just like literally, I was in like the best shape of my life, went to England to be a painter, and like literally just ate baked beans on toast for a year and like starved to death.
Wow.
But I was like, this is amazing. You know, like I'm an artist, you know, but it definitely put a, but I always had that aesthetic, you know, bug in my head. And now my trainer now is this guy, Alessandro. He trained everyone for Rebel Moon. And he's like in his early 60s, Italian, was a bodybuilder, was a power lifter, became a bodybuilder. And he's like, you know, he's just like this, he's a hard Italian, no bullshit. Like, you know, it was cool because during the training for Rebel Moon, one of the actors was like, I have an idea for a workout. Do you want to hear it? He's like, I have an idea for a movie.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, or like the guys at the gym, like, because, you know, he used to like judge bodybuilding competitions and, you know, has his pro card and everything, was like a real bodybuilder. And they'd say like, hey, can you come and look at me? You know, I have a contest coming up in the bathroom. And they'd go in there and the guy'd take his shirt off and he'd be like, how long till the competition? I'm like, oh, you could be like, I got 2 months till the competition. And Alessandro would be like, I think next year for you is going to be better.
Wow.
You know, it's like, oh, you know, and he has no problem saying, you know, like, I think I need to lose like 40 pounds, more like 80.
Jesus.
He's like, he's hard, but he's awesome. He's like, no bullshit. Like he's hilarious. I think he's, and like, you know, he trained the guys for Rebel Moon and he's like a pure aesthetic. Mm-hmm. Trainer, like
right.
Pure aesthetic, you know. He's
just going for a look.
He's seen everything, you know,
yeah.
and he just like, okay, you know, your abs could be sharper, you know.
Yeah, that's a weird thing.
Yeah, it's like a whole thing, you know.
Yeah.
It's like just like
it is a whole
it's like
thing.
a whole thing.